Okay, got the stream going. Let me share the link with my class should you choose to follow along live. And this is titled Testing and Handling Errors. What do I call it? Handling errors from the back end on the front end. And so I will post the live stream link in Discord text. And we are working on the same project, the Tail Runner app. That is just a demo app for my class. It is full stack. And it is on GitHub, as you guys know, as my students know. Let's start by closing all tabs, close all. And if you want to just do a pull, but if you want the actual, if you haven't cloned the repo, you might start there. If I go to my repositories, this is right here, called Evan Gudmestead /tailrunner on github.com. And so you can kind of see this is just something we've been slowly building all semester. I've got 22 commits to kind of build it so far. And it is a working full stack. You know, we've got a Mongo database, Node, Express, and React. And I'm just going to do some testing today and fixing some errors. I have the unique experience of helping many of you all in class and seeing some of the struggles that you're having, and the struggles that some people are having more than others is like, well, I'm getting this error and I don't know how to troubleshoot it. And so I just thought I'd go through and show you how I might troubleshoot some of the problems as I come across them. And to do that, we got to do a little bit more testing and do some, actually find some problems. So I plan on testing a little bit more thoroughly than I've tested so far, searching for bugs. And when I find a bug, showing the process on what I do to fix it. And so we got a back end separate from the front end. So to run the back end, there's a start dev script. So that kind of gets my back end running, and this pings my Mongo database so that my Express server can talk to my database. And I have another, I'm going to start another terminal here. And let's go to the front end, cd front end. So now I'm in this front end folder, and I've got a different script there, which is called build auto, which kind of runs a build vite command, so it'll compile my front end components into an index HTML and into a JavaScript file and a CSS file. And so it'll take those components that we write and transform those components into standard HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I use Postman to kind of isolate the back end and test the back end by itself. And I've got my routes all saved in one of these collections called Tail Runner. And so here is one of my users. If I just kind of start fresh and look at my users, so all my users are saved in the Mongo database, and their passwords are encrypted. So here is my Tail Runner users collection. Now this has authentication and authorization. So authentication, authorization. So our users have roles, and those roles have permissions. So like I've got a customer and an admin. So my Evan at rankin.edu is an admin. And then if I look at the customer and admin, what they can do. Okay, so I haven't really done a whole lot of testing. For example, what if I am just a customer and a customer tries to edit the users or do something they don't have permissions to do? What kind of error does the backend send? And how might you go about handling that, right? So that's kind of what I'm going to get at, is like I've got all these backend authorization rules on, like, here's my users, and let me kind of highlight some middleware that we wrote. Maybe on like a dog owner. We got these other collections. Here we go. So here you have to have some permission to be able to read some data. So what happens if you try and hit the back end and you don't have that permission? How can we handle that? And just in general, some other testing. So let's go ahead and log in as my admin, and let's see what we get. So we get user logged in successfully. I've got some roles that the backend sends. The roles in an array. It's just an array of strings. I've got an email property. Now that email property I use. So if I kind of go here, now I've got my backend wired up to serve my front end. So here, this line is an important line that'll serve up my dist folder. And this says, hey, you look for your React front end. So if I go to front end dist, this index file is that file that's being generated by my build script on the front end. So this is a really important line for my back end to say, hey, serve up that dist folder on my front end. And if I do that right now, you know, my first component is a login component. Now, something else I need to do here is actually flush out a landing page. You know, there's really no theme, if you will, or this is all just pretty much generic Bootstrap colors. I think I, put some basic animation stuff in here. Now, this might be something worth troubleshooting. You get this check mark. This check mark comes from Bootstrap validation, saying on the front end validation, it says that there's so many characters. So I think as soon as I pass to 5 characters, this is just front end validation. And so you might see this and you say, oh, that's a good password. But then you click submit and you get the invalid email or password. So this would definitely be confusing to an end user. I don't love that. In fact, what I would do here, my first thought is, well, I just remove the front end validation, but that's not a great thing. Maybe you have to wire it up so that this submit button, if you get this invalid email or password, you also just change the classes here. The way the Bootstrap validation works is it adds some classes here. So like if I just kind of glance at this, the class is form control input field. Watch what happens if I change that. Actually, I thought you would actually see the classes here, but you could see the styling over here. So here it is what's called a pseudo class right here, but it's basically the pseudo class of invalid. So Bootstrap validation puts on this pseudo class, this pseudo CSS class, which changes the border color. Oh, there it is. This border color right there. And it's obviously, there it goes. I do all those. I start removing all these pseudo classes, and maybe it's just this one right here. Okay, and that's so anyways, maybe that's something to fix. I don't necessarily love that I'm getting some different things there. But let's just log in. So again, Evan at rankin.edu, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I like to start with. Okay, now Evan is an admin, and an admin can view the data. So when I log in, I get a successful login. I see my list of pet owners. I believe I've got working CRUD operations. And so here's Billy Bob. I click delete. He's gone. If I click edit, I can edit my my pet owners. So I've shown edits working, I've shown deletes working, and I think name my dog after myself. And so that's kind of the current working state. I also have like a nav bar with my email address is kind of persisting. Like I can refresh and kind of navigate around, and it's persisting my my user up in the nav bar. I can log out, get that little toast. Let's register a new user and see what's going on there. Now this will be interesting because we can start doing some troubleshooting here. So what happens if I register a user that already exists? So I already have an Evan at rankin.edu, and if we look at my back end, throws, got a little disconnection from OBS, reconnected. My backend throws a 500 that says error registering user if my user already exists. So this would be a good example of the backend that's going to throw a status code, an HTTP status code of 500 that says error registering user, and I would expect this to break. 1, 2, 3, let's just see what happens. Now you click submit, and nothing happens. If I go to my console, now that's an interesting thing. So I am getting an exception, and we'll fix that up. Let's clear that. Let's refresh. I think I got this working, but let me double check myself. Let's get it working before we break it. So let's see my users and find one that doesn't exist. I got Bob at Gmail, and I got my personal Gmail. So let's register another Rankin employee. And okay, it does say user registered successfully. Doesn't like my insecure password, but it does log the user in. And as I refresh, I just went from 12 users to 13 users. And there's dpol at rankin.edu, and you can see he is a customer. Now if I go to role, customers can view the data. So it should probably log me here, right? So this brings me here. Now a customer cannot edit. So this is something also that I want to show, is how do we not show them that? or can customer edit? Let's go back to permissions. Can view data. So that's another problem to fix because my customer should not be able to edit. And there's multiple ways of fixing this, but my backend should be protecting this. Now, oh, it's because I don't have, of course, my edit route. So let's get this edit route. So here, my backend is not protecting dog owners from being updated. See here? All right, so let's bring in has permission, which is can edit this is a different collection, so I'll say pet owners. So that's the permission. And let's not forget our commas. Let's edit the role. Can edit pet owners is a Boolean true. All right. So now to get these new permissions kind of assigned, well, now can edit pet owners has that. Let's go back to my front end. I'm now logged in as Don Pohl, who's a customer, should not be able to edit. Let's see now that my, okay, better, because we get a 403 of forbidden, and that's what I would expect from the back end. So this is 17 minutes to get to this point where I'm having a back end error that's kind of affecting my front end, and I need to handle that. Now, in Chrome, you got to look at the console and begin to drill down into this object. And just as I'm looking at this, you can start with what is HT. No idea why they call that HT. But I know this is the response object coming from the server. Again, kind of, request response cycle. Good morning. I'm just doing a little coding demo.
What's that?
I'm just doing a little coding demo.
Oh,
Yeah.
I should join in.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's good. It's good.
Almost done.
You're on the internet. Okay, no problem. So why is it a 500? Why is it, a 403? If you dig into has permission, you can actually click this and you could see kind of where that's coming from. We're throwing a new error, 403. You do not have these permissions. It's actually going to be that line. All right, so you can see where this is coming from. If you kind of look at that middleware, has permission. So let's drill down. So response, data, error. Response, data, error. And so I'm showing that because this is the object that we're going to have to traverse in order to get the useful error message. This is the useful error message that we kind of need to display to our user. Instead of no error message, we're going to show this error message. You do not have any of these permissions. So what's the takeaway here? How do you troubleshoot this? You have to constantly in this world, in this JavaScript world, look at the console, look at the error messages that you are getting, and figure out what is the browser telling us. What is it saying? Response data error contains useful information, so now we need to show that. So let's go to our front end and source, components, register user form. Now, I'm already doing a little bit of validation here because if you use the browser to hit my back end, if you use the website will send an email and password. Sometimes malicious users might use tools like Postman to hit your back end. If they know a back end route, if they know a URL to your back end, they can circumvent that. And so if by chance you were to leave the password off, I'm going to show that kind of is what this code is all about. But we're not. Let's stay focused here. So we are catching an error, and we're console logging that error, which is why we're getting this in the first place. You take off that console log error, take that off, reboot the back end, clear that out, submit form again. Let's refresh. Did I refresh? Normally you console log. Normally you can get this, but not this. It's the same error. So all I have to do is traverse response, data, error. Now this is if there are errors. So I'm just going to put another if dot data dot error singular. Error singular I just showed. This was 403 forbidden from middleware on the back end. Can I type? There we go. And I'm going to console log exactly that. Okay, I'm just going to start by console logging to make sure my response data error is console log. So reboot, save, take a look at the front end. It should rebuild. Go back here, clear that, refresh. And I'm almost wondering if I'm doing my rebuild. Doesn't seem like it's rebuilding. Let me watch the front end as it's not, because I'm only changing my back end code, so it's not doing a rebuild on my front end because I'm not changing front end code. So no, yes I am. Register user form. Save. Okay, it is rebuilding. Getting myself crossed. Okay, did a rebuild. Let's go back here. Let's go back home. Registered pet owners. I'm logged in. Edit. It's not letting me do the error or the it's also not logging let's just say catch or short error registering user. Let's just get a string printed out there. Refresh. Okay, so it's not doing what I'm thinking it's doing. And I'm not sure why. So I'm going to console log. It's certainly, oh, I'm putting it in the wrong place. This is add edit form, and this is register user form. Apologies. Let's go to add edit pet owner. Aha. Here, await, we don't have a try catch. So I'm going to put this in a try catch console log error. Okay, so here we're running an update operation. We're running a patch, and we should catch, and it'll say the error is error. There it is. The error is error. Now we're getting some response. And hard to see. It's still a status of 403. And let's see, there's the error is message. Well, that's a lot easier. That's a lot less traversing. The error is there's just a message property. So if let's console log the error message error dot message. Okay. Refresh. Now we're getting the error message request failed with status code 403. Is that a useful error message for the end user? Not at all. But we do know 403 is forbidden. You don't have permission. So we can just reword that into something a little bit friendlier. And if we catch, we have a function already written to kind of show error messages in that toast, and that was in our app JSX. We've got this show error message, so we're just going to send that down to the correct component. This is right there. Show error equals show error. Okay, so that's add edit pet owner. Let's receive that. Okay, so we're receiving that show error. And let's show error. Okay. Refresh. Okay, Perfect. Request failed with status code 403. Kind of, achieve the result, which is get an error from the back end, give some sort of useful information. Now, what's a better solution? We're not going to give them that error code. We're going to give them something more useful that an end user would understand, which is somehow you ended up here. That's my bad. In other words, you probably shouldn't even let a user get to that screen. You shouldn't let a user get to that screen. We're going to fix that. But you do not have permissions to edit that record. Okay. How about that one? That's a little more descriptive. Refresh. Okay. Better. And we've done that. So that's one kind of error, and that's coming from has permission. I showed this the other day, so I'm going to repeat myself here. But I also want to handle an error on the back end. Let me go back to my back end. Where we were using Joy to have a schema on the back end of what is the information that is required. And so now if I go to my user, I don't know if I'm working with Joy over here. I was. So I kind of demonstrated a little bit of Joy, and you guys really just needed a little intro to Joy, but this is back-end validation. So let's kind of add back-end validation here to my dog owners. We're going to import Joy. And we're going to have a Joy schema of an object. And this is going to be called pet owner schema. How about update pet owner schema? And kind of looking here, it's going to have an optional dogs array, or if it's a string, certainly that would not be required. Turns out, what do you update? It's pretty much, they're all optional. You could just update one field if you wanted to, and that's kind of how this is set up. If I log out and log in as my admin, who does have permissions, right? We can just edit one field. It doesn't have to be really anything. But let's make sure that our pet owners at least have a first and last name. We'll just make those two things required. I think that makes sense. So if they somehow send something without the last name or something without the first name, we're going to at least make that required. So that makes sense. Now, I believe last name we call it the family name, and first name we call the given name. So let's see what we call those fields. So pet owner. Oh, here I do call it first name and last name. First name and last name. That's what I call it on the front end. when I send that over, I send the whole object. So I send the whole object to my backend, whether I'm doing an add operation or an edit operation. I'm sending an entire object. So on the back end, I receive an object, and that object must have, at this point, it's going to have a first name and a last name. And there's no minimum, but it is required. Maybe we say at least one character. Oop. And so if we're going to patch, we wrote some middleware on our back end called valid body. So this is our Joy middleware function where we send in a schema. So we're going to import valid body. And let me see how this is exported in valid body. Okay, so it is going to require import curly's valid body from, and we have to go up 2 directories, out of API, out of routes, then we go down middleware, and there we find valid body. So that pathing looks correct for that middleware function. And then I'm going to be able to call valid body and pass it the update pet owner schema. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of back-end data validation going on with Joy when we update our pet owners. And so let's see if our admin should still be able to just do a normal update. And that's clearly not what you want. And so that is the exercise, is troubleshooting these errors. So it says patch 400 bad requests. And so if I just take that back off, if I take the valid body back off, and clear and refresh. Okay, so it is valid body that's breaking it, so let's put it back on. And so now this is a good exercise, and let's see if we hit our backend route. Updating dog owner with don't remember, yeah, with rec ID. So let's see if our debug on our backend is hit. We click edit, we click 1. Okay, so we're not even hitting line 71 because valid body is our middleware that's blocking it. And I think what's happening is these fields, even though that's what we named them on the front end, are causing the issue. So I'm wondering if my variable names here are causing the issue, but let's troubleshoot and figure that out. So here's update pet owner schema causing the problem, first name, last name. Let's go to let's store the result of that call in a variable, and then console log that. Okay. Cool. Clear. Refresh. And so this add edit dog so let's console log error here because it's not doing the other one. So it's giving me this, even though that's because I didn't keep my if statement in there. I should have kept my if statement in there. So it did. Request failed with status code of 400, which is the same deal there. So I have to dig a little deeper. Let's go back to the back end. And let's look at valid body. There's my status code of 400. So that's what it's doing, because my schema is not validating. This is tricky. Now, pet owner, let's just gonna console log the whole pet owner object. So before I send it to the back end, I'm just gonna send over the whole pet owner to the console. Has an ID, first name, last name, dogs. This guy has orders and a wish list. Now if I were to receive that object on the back end, here's what I'm going to do. On the back end, take off valid body so I can hit my route. Let's look at this. We get an ID, get a current owner, okay, here's our updated owner. I'm just going to spit out the updated owner. Okay, so I'm going to comment that out. Okay, I'm checking for first name and I'm checking for last name. So it is first name and last name on the back end. Now if I go here, updated owner, let me take this min one off. These are both strings, but it does have a first name and last name, right? It's an object, it has a first name and a last name, so I would think that it would go on through. So let's go to update. Valid body, update owner. Now my assumption is if I leave all, if I'm remembering right, all these other things like ID and dogs, these are all optionals. Joy, this would just say these two things are required, everything else is optional. Yes, sir. You use them optional, right? But I do want to make those two things required. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So we're validating the rec.body. Now this has an errors. Here's the Joy docs. And let's look at objects. So I'm just adding something here just to see if that changes what we receive. Okay, now there's also something else to try. Which is how I'm sending the data here. Here I'm just sending the whole pet owner. And I wonder if that's being received pet owner dot first name. Yeah, it's really not happy. It's not liking my syntax. Maybe if I send it like this. Let's see here. I'm not getting the useful error messages. So we'll see if that's any use. And so this is one thought, was there's a lot of other properties in there. Kind of going back to here, maybe we just add ID is optional. It's nice when troubleshooting, you fix your problems fast, but I'm not fixing my problems fast. Sorry for that. I want to look at something here. I'm going to try taking off the required. Even though I want it to be required, just take off the required. I think it has the way this is doing is this is sending this whole object and it's being received as rec.body. So let's just, again, let's spread it out right here. Which I was doing it down here, but it's the same difference. Let's try. Let's just see. Okay. So I think my mistake this whole time might have been that my incorrect assumption was that all these properties could be left off, where these are all things that were part of my user. And so since they were optional fields, and I started going down that path, now let's see if I update valid body. The unfortunate thing is like what I'm tempted to do at this point is just leave off joy on the back end and just validate data on the front end. But that's not the point. Dogs. Let me try a different user that's not so complex. Now we got it. So no surprise, writing the correct schema. Now, let's see if I leave off the ID, right? So my body is sending over the ID. So if I wanted that ID as maybe an optional field, my original assumption was just like leaving that ID off. Okay, so if I kind of go back here, submit the form, leaving that ID off as like an optional piece was not happy. So getting the right joy schema on the back end was my problem, and that took me a long time, and I used a little ChatGPT to get there. But you know, the challenge that I have is the shape of my pet owners. And if I go to pet owners, they're not all the same shape. And what I mean by that is some have orders, some have a wish list. You know, so these are obviously going to have to be optional, but they all have dogs, right? So getting that right shape where orders and wish list would also have to be a part of this, right? Those would have to be optional. But those were the more complex objects. So I was just fixing this here because I don't have orders and wish lists right now showing on my edit form. So I got rid of that, and that was the problem solved. So, okay. That took a while to get to the solution, at least for that. And I do want to bring back in the here, this was still the permissions deal. Here, instead of just saying the error is error, so a little bit of troubleshooting there. ultimately got to that solution. And I'm going to put this behind an if statement back to where it was. So now it's only going to display that if that error has a message kind of thing. So let's log out, log back in. Okay, now he doesn't have permissions to edit my users. So it is saying the error is error. So what I did then is and there's different ways to do this, but the error is, this is just a string. There we go. Now we got that behind an if statement. And if the status is a 403, it says you do not have permissions. And then really what I want to do is not even show this user the edit button, right? If I go here, obviously if you don't have permissions to edit a user, I wouldn't even show them the button. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of where I'm going to stop it for today. Some of that was taking a little bit of time, but we ultimately got to a solution. And that just shows how difficult it can be sometimes troubleshooting those back-end problems on the front end. It's really all about getting into that console and trying to get useful error messages out of your back end. If you can't get to the front end, useful error messages, and you got to start looking at the back end, and can you get useful messages in the back end to show you what you want that ultimately get you to that solution. So, okay, that was a tough one, but troubleshooting is always tough. So we'll stop there.